So welcome everyone to today's webinar. We've got a good number of people dialed in already, which is great to see. We're going to be talking about best practices in performance and quality management, which I think is a fascinating topic and one where I think probably there's quite a large degree of improvement that an awful lot of call centres can see in terms of the way that we operate, which is absolutely great. So just going to introduce everyone to you if you've not joined us early. So I'd like to start off with Martin Hill-Wilson, who will be taking us through the results of the P&Q Challenge. Martin, the idea for well, perhaps you'd like to explain what the P&Q Challenge is.
It's a 6-month program. Everybody who takes part in it turns up once a month, and we pick a topic. We'll go through that in a wee while. And then between times, they go do stuff, which is all about changing their approach to performance and quality. And actually, what we've just been discussing, the consumer and their expectations, is exactly why the P&Q exists. So it's becoming fit for purpose to pursue that kind of customer expectation.
Wonderful, thank you for that, Martin. And Simon Thatcher from Echo Managed Services, you've actually gone through the P&Q campaign.
Yes, we did. Yeah, absolutely. So not so long ago. So as a real kind of eye-opener, and I think for me, the chance to get in a room with lots of people in the same kind of industry and just have that chance to talk to people about what they're doing, and it's a really fantastic environment to think about what's best for you and how you move it forward.
And for people who aren't familiar with Echo Managed Services, you're an outsourcer based in...
We're based in Bristol, so wide variety of different clients covering, so we do things like web chat and social media monitoring, as well as traditional inbound, outbound, and dealing with emails as well.
And Jonathan Wax from Nexidia, welcome to you. You're dialing in from the city of London. Yeah, and you're going to be talking us through it in a short while about
just by some tools.
The role that technology can play.
Yes, if you look at what the P&Q Challenge is trying to do, is it's changing the way you're going to be approaching the whole performance management piece, and to do it effectively, those elements could be automated, and so we're going to talk through how we can deliver that.
Okay, wonderful. We've got a slight problem on the line from Jonathan there. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to, you could get a copy of the slides from the chat room, CallCentreHelper.com/chat. We are going to be doing top tips and questions from the audience. We like to make these sessions as interactive as possible, and there's either a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for the best tip that is coming through, and I'm going to ask Simon to pick the best tip immediately after the webinar. You can watch a replay of this, and the white paper will be sent out to you after the webinar. So the chat room, CallCentreHelper.com/chat, very straightforward, no commercial messages, web addresses or emails, only through direct messages, and please keep it nice and polite in there. And then if you want to download the webinar slides, once you're logged in, just follow this link on the top right-hand side, and if you want to download the chat log, you can use that. So while you're all typing CallCentreHelper.com/chat in, I would also like to pose the question to you all in the chat room, and that is, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you change most about performance and quality management? So if you could wave a magic wand, in sort of short answer, what would you change most about quality and performance management? So we'll just have a look at the results of that coming through, and we'll just turn the web cameras off. So let's have a look and see what some of the answers coming through is. So if you could wave a magic wand, what would you change most about performance and quality management? So Anna says it's the time that the whole process takes. Tracy says feedback to the agents and being consistent. Sarah says make it easy to get it right. So I guess it's easy said.
There you go. There you go.
Elle says make it easier to measure. There's so much data to plow through.
Yeah.
Did you wade through lots of data?
Definitely. I think it's really easy to get caught up with the amount of information you've got rather than focus on what's really important for you and your organisation.
Margaret says metrics that are easy to comprehend. Matt says buy-in from the business. Danny says consistency with the completed assessments overall staff, so that's a bit more for consistency in the process. Dell says I changed the focus from being about average performance to more about top quality performance.
Yeah, that's something we discussed quite heavily on the actual challenge, about how it's very easy to lose who's doing well and who's perhaps a bit behind when you just look at that average.
Dee says ties the quality metrics to other agenda KPIs, average handling time, efficiency after call work, customer sat, and so on. Tracy says more focus on customer experience and customer effort. And Emma said customer-focused results rather than a followed process. So I think that quite an interesting feedback, Martin. Does that tie in
perfectly
with some of the results you've seen from
It does. I mean, I think probably most people would say, as far as the P&Q challenge is concerned, we've started the journey. The P&Q challenge provided a map for that journey. The feedback we're getting here is, again, more widespread recognition that some of the stereotype, you know, it's all about clipboards, it's all about tick boxes, it's all very internal, we're beginning to shift that.
Well, it's now probably a good chance to jump across to you, Martin, and have a look at the latest results that have come out of the P&Q challenge. So I'm just going to pass this across.
Thanks very much. Okay, so let's just get our screen up and running. Now, is that us visible?
Just need to go into full screen mode.
Right, let's just get across to here. There we go. Is that us up and running now?
We'll be in 1 second.
No, we're still at outline mode, are we?
Set 5 mode on the machine.
Has that pulled it up? No, not yet. Tell you what, let me just take that out, see if that changes the behaviour. There.
Yeah. Yep,
that's what we need. Okay,
I'm going through.
Good. Yes, so just to scene set, we want to have a quick chat about really what we've learned over the last 3 years, I suppose, of running them. It's a 6-month program, and we've pretty much had a series every year to date. We've actually got 2 running at the moment, 2 new ones just started. And definitely some things have come out as a result of that. So I'd like to share a few of those ideas with you, get Simon really to be the proof of the pudding by having been through it and pick up. And any opportunity, Simon, just please chip in and add stuff. And by the way, people in the audience as well, feel free to you know, add to stuff. Right, just very simply, we started a couple of years back now with a campaign which actually began with a questionnaire which simply said, in essence, what frustrates you about the current way you're doing it and what would you ideally like to see in the future. That produced some data which enabled us to do a roadshow. We built out an approach as a result of that, and then we thought the best way to actually focus that would be a challenge. And I think that has proved to be very sensible because it has given people space to do that work, and has undoubtedly been one of the major benefits of that. Typically anything between 8 to, I think we're up to about 20 now on the current group. We're doing 1 in Bristol and 1 up in Manchester, so it's growing, and that then gets people to a certain point of competency. And then from that point onwards they grow and develop their own next generation of P&Q. And the way that we've framed the challenge is this, to give people a milestone to focus upon. The framework I'll show you in a tick, but basically the evidence you need to provide of having done the challenge successfully is that you've completed it. And the evidence for that, when we come on a site visit for you, is to see how the old world and the new words compare. We don't, by the way, have a view how transformational that needs to be, but it does need to be at least 1 degree of change, otherwise you've spent 6 months not getting anywhere fast. And the other thing that we do, which we're big on, is visualization, because it's just such a great form of communication.
Yeah, and I think that was what was really interesting and different. It was very much, I think sometimes you can get quite tied up in making things look very pretty and professional, but actually this just allows you to explore, you know, what things can really look like, and you know, the whole creativity does make a difference when you're thinking about what you're actually going to be doing going forward.
Yeah, I think we've got some. I think you guys did some great visualization as well.
Yes, we did. Thanks to Jamie, who did some amazing illustrations on the day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we've got that one. That's very powerful to share with people. And then the second thing is basically the plan to make it happen. It's not necessary by the end of the challenge, by the way, to have done much change, but in practice we found most people have done it actually as they've gone along. But it's how you're introducing it and the benefits that you're getting out of it, particularly regarding stakeholders. So advisors, team leaders, site managers, customers, senior leaders, what are the benefits, so people are clear about the transformation. And then, because it's all about eating in the final analysis, we bring everyone together. And this year, I think we're meeting up in St. Ermin's Hotel, London, in May, is it? April. And so the current generation of people will be there, but also we're going to bring the alumni along. So we're beginning to build a bit of a community of best practice as well, which is, I think, another of the key benefits that everyone gets from it. And by the way, it was designed to be crowdsourced. And this is a serious point. The industry is literally inventing this as opposed to anybody else. And the material, by the way, is again, public domain. So once you get to the award, this is what it kind of looks like. There are some of the visuals that Simon was just saying on the back there, some of the great work, and it sort of just, it theatricalizes, if you want, dramatizes out, the experiences. And then this is actually, I think, one of the water companies actually presenting, and people were watching that stuff there. We like to acknowledge it because I know how important it is to validate milestones. So we've created ourselves a little accreditation, which again we award to everyone so they can put it on the wall in the call center. And that's proved to be a popular thing. And then in a totally random, unexpected way, we also award a bit of bling as well. And that's based upon, we don't know until we do the site stuff, but we awarded one for you, didn't we?
Yes, we did, yeah. Absolutely.
What did you get it for?
Ours was for the honest approach we took to how we came to deciding what we were going to do.
Okay, so that's probably a one-off, and it was honest, actually, for a number of reasons. One, they had a client in the evaluation, which I thought was extremely honest and brave, but the way that they represented where they thought they had been, and then how they evolved, it was just a very honest appraisal, so that was acknowledged. So we will do that on occasion with others as well.
And on the screen behind, is that part of the process?
Yes, now that actually was, this is SOA housing up in Didcot, John T. And that was their particular way of visualizing what they'd done. Yeah. So, and actually they come up with a super way, very simple transformation, which was, whilst we're on it, it's very interesting. Call center, listening to customers. It's all about residents wanting repairs. The repair team, which I have now come to understand in housing is always a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And trying to get lowly call center people to influence repair was difficult. So they made a very simple process, which was CEO is sitting on top. And one of those little slides there says, you'll have a hot, sweaty conversation unless you listen to the call center person. And it works. They're just sending the feedback out, and the repair people are getting straight in.
Wonderful.
And it's as simple as that they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's already making a difference. So very good. And that lady there, who's holding the younger lady, runs the call center, and she actually presented on the day. They had 4 customers in the room, again, because in their terms of reference, they need to have customers actually on the board, which is interesting. And it was her very first public presentation. So it was amazing. She really did a great job. So there were lots of learnings and benefits there. Anyway, what we were up for is this: for everyone in the UK industry to collectively invent the next generation of operational performance and quality management to make it work in more effective ways where appropriate. So the context for this is to say, look, the world's changed. It continues to change. We saw the evidence of that earlier on. There are changes not just out in the world, but also with the workforce. I mean, the workforce today is certainly different from a decade ago, certainly different from 20-odd years ago. Their expectations of how they're managed and looked after are quite different. We've been on an agenda for years, haven't we, trying to reintroduce a quality element into the staff and to the approach. That matters a ton. We still know that employee engagement is woefully low relative to, because we know that impacts customer engagement and all that kind of good stuff. So we need to turn the wheel. And the point is to say, here's a process that allows you to methodically turn the wheel. This slide, by the way, is just a share of who's gotten involved. So the top one in color says everybody who's helped us out to date, being very much a sort of industry effort. And the names at the bottom there are just those of you who've just started the latest challenge. So some folk up at Manchester, some folk down in Bristol, and those weird acronyms afterwards. For those of you who don't know, that just says the Contact Centre Managers Association, and the Bristol has got the South West and the Welsh Contact Centre Forum, so it's been very much a regional thing.
And I think for me, what was really interesting, because you were drawing on people from so many different areas, you just saw perspectives that you would never even have thought of before, because it was things that were really important to them. And so actually you could sort of see, well, can I apply that? Does that make a difference to my ways of thinking? And all of a sudden you're expanding your kind of area of knowledge and who you interact with, and you get some really great ideas from sources that unless you've been involved in this kind of process, you wouldn't necessarily have that kind of direct contact.
Yeah. And very important, for example, so the problem we're solving, this is actually how we started the whole research, and it's as good a way of summarizing the frustrations of the old approach to life. So it's an expensive manual process of quality monitoring. It doesn't scale particularly well. It's low sample size. That means you literally just don't spot stuff. That's the reality of that statistical approach, which means some stuff that needs to change doesn't ever get sorted out, and that's not good news. Also, a lot of folk, from advisors actually through to management teams, don't really believe the value of an insight which is only 1 or 2 calls versus however many that person's done in a month. So they will not make significant decisions about change based on that data, which means that either advisors go cry that's unfair. I was having a bad hair day.
Absolutely.
That doesn't work. And from a team leader's perspective, I can't coach very effectively because I'm not dealing with a great deal of insight as a point of that. So we get back into management by chocolate, which is unhealthy and non-specific at the end of the day, and therefore low behavioural impact. And then the middle bit says inflexible scoring, it's always done. And there's an interesting thing at the moment. Those people that have got into scoring, I've noticed a number of times, everybody seems to be fixated that the pass rate is 93%. I have no idea. There is another bottle of champagne from myself personally. If anybody knows the history of why it's settled on 93%, nobody knows. Literally, it's just got established. Nobody that does anything with it anyway.
We sort of discussed this, didn't we? And none of us could come up with it the other day as to why we picked a specific number to say that's okay.
So anybody in the States or anybody else around the world that is running a quality scoring system, let us know whether or not, what yours is, ours is 94. Scope creep, that's interesting. It's gone up 1% for some strange deviation. But there you go, why is it that number? It's most bizarre anyway. So inflexible scoring, and that leads to weak proof points at the end of the day. So it all just reinforces itself. So the summary is to say it's high effort, low value at the end of the day, and I think most people experience that. So that was our experience of doing the rounds and why we're actually running the P&Q. Here's a chance for you to add your voice to that discussion, and I've given you 4 options here. Your current approach. Tell us which ones apply and feel fit your current approach to quality, and we'll see what we get from that.
So is your current approach to quality high effort, low value, and you can select all that apply? Is it effective at improving advisor performance? Is it welcomed and trusted by advisors, or does it make your service quality a competitive edge? So if you just like to select on those that apply to you, just like to put the votes in there. Simon, which one do you think?
Any guesses on it?
Well, I would say, based on some of the comments that people were saying earlier on, I would say I think a lot of people think that it's high effort, but actually, in terms of outputs, they're probably struggling to see, does it really make a difference, and does it drive forward the kind of agenda for who the contact centre wants to be?
Well, let's have a look at the results now. We'll share those up on the screen. So 48% say it's high effort, low value. About 45% though do say it is effective at improving advisor performance. 15% say it's welcomed and trusted by advisors, and 17% say it makes our service quality a competitive edge. So there's sort of quite a...
So I'd say case proven.
Yeah.
Actually, there you go. So huge, acknowledgement, recognition. We need to reinvent that, because after you've bought tech, after you've had duvet days, whatever we're talking about as diversions, the core activity in the call centre is day-to-day management, isn't it?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, which is centred in performance and quality. And yet most of us feel it's not a very effective approach. So it's ripe for transformation.
The one that surprised me on there, 15% welcomed and trusted by advisors. I mean, I would have thought that's that. I mean, I thought it would be low, but not quite that low.
I think people actually go, how the heck can you tell what I've been doing in a month just based on one call?
Yeah. I think it's also to do with and where with our journey. Part of that was speaking to the people on the floor and saying, how does it affect you? And when you get comments back from people saying, we feel it's a little bit like it's a school exercise. I come up to the desk, I think I've perhaps been a little bit naughty, and you give me a tick sheet. You sort of get the sense, well, actually, that's not going to make you think that it's going to be a worthwhile experience for yourself.
Yeah. Back to the plot. Let's have a look. So, the screen that you see in front of you, and I think we're giving some stuff out after this, and you can see the detail of this at your leisure. This represents the discussions that we have over that 6-month period, and we methodically go around. And one of the key insights, by the way, is this: you can't muck around with one of them without mucking around with all of them. And yet, because of our time being so compressed in contact centres, there's always the next urgency to deal with. What we tend to do is look at the symptoms. So you'll typically find most people have played around with P&Q at the level of the evaluation sheet. Do I add a line? Do I take a line off? Do I make it 3-bar, 4-bar, da-da-da-da-da? That's just symptomatic at the end of the day. And what really matters is that you get everything teed up and lined up. So this conversation allows you to methodically think about scope, involvement, the orientation, the focus, and make sure that it all ties up together. I'll just give you one example of what would typically happen on, so it's an ecosystem way of thinking about it. Here's one example, number 3. What would typically be your, is that inputs or outputs? Inputs, isn't it? And we've defined what we're looking for as an outcome to the discussion, which is clarity on which data sources you're going to use, some suggestions on what you might use as inputs, and external surveys, internal ones, evaluations, analytics, etc. And then what happens is once the team has sat down and discussed it at a table level, typically people will then take an A3 sheet, which is blank at this particular point, and fill it in. So after 6 months, you have basically got all of these filled in as the basis of your plan. However, a lot of people will take that away and immediately implement and go and start to talk to people, reproduce the conversation that they've just had with other people. And it produces a very integrated and actually quite a strongly powerful transformation as a result of that kind of thinking. And you're typically working with other companies as well, which helps you out.
And I think you have to have a very honest approach to this as well. I mean, there's no point in looking at this and thinking, we can solve this in a couple of months. You've got to really think about the time, effort that's put into it, because actually transformation isn't necessarily a very quick thing. No. Sometimes you've got to think about, well, what's the long-term gain from putting in those extra hours?
And actually, all we're asking for is for people to commit to the program. Next City has been good enough to, stump up the cost of actually the rooms and all the rest of the kind of good stuff. And what tends to happen is there's an anchor person that turns up for the 6 months, and then different folk turn up at different stages depending on the conversation, which again is very useful because it exposes either more senior teams or even advisors come on, or marketing people come in occasionally, and it's pretty useful from the point of view of having that facilitated discussion. There's also quite a useful little audit that you can do, which I thought I would share with you, and this is typically happening on Workshop 1. And it's the result of asking a question which we had on the roadshow, which said, what would a healthy P&Q ecosystem actually look like? And this is entirely from the groups themselves. All I did was to organize it into some logical blocks. And again, I think most people start to get a bit of an aha when they start to fill that form in and see where some of the crosses are, etc., etc. And I've picked a few of them out for you so that you can have the fun of doing that yourself right now. And I've got 4 of them, which I think are indicative of the new cultures that people are trying to build. And again, it would be interesting to see how we as an audience today fare relative to those particular things.
So do you currently match the perfect P&Q ecosystem which, and select all that apply, which requires a flexible mindset culture and avoids the tick box mentality, and this is your current state we're looking at now, empowers a culture of people being listened to, valued and encouraged, enables the frontline view of quality to influence management's decisions, or has the flexibility to adapt as customer needs change. So if you just like to vote on if any of those attributes, I guess we don't have a box that says none of the above.
No, it'd be easy. But actually, I think some of the ways that I've seen it being used is it's a way of describing the vision of where people want to get to. So it's been used as a document to take back in and talk to people as a vision statement almost about something healthy. And I would imagine, although I have yet to hear it, people who've been through it might want to review that after a given period of time to see what progress they've made.
Okay, well let's put the results up on the screen. Now this is only for the people who've ticked it, which is about half of the people who voted. So 27% requires a flexible mindset culture.
Yeah.
34% empowers a culture of people being listened to, valued, and encouraged. 42% enables the frontline view of quality, and probably the winner is 59% has the flexibility to adapt as customers' needs change.
Okay, so that's encouraging actually. So people are saying We've got a fairly flexible system. That's pretty positive, about 60%. Yeah, that's good stuff. Frontline view of quality to influence decisions. That's under half. And I think, again, one of the great things that we keep stumbling across on this program is that advisors are not simply somebody who picks up the phone, engages on chat, does another email. They're worth much, much more than that. And in fact, what they do is they store up a cumulative picture of the customer experience. And if you tap into that by asking them, it's not difficult, get over the AHT implications, they will tell you a ton of stuff. And they, in today's fast-changing world, are vital to tell you what's changing. So that's important. Empowers the culture being listened to. Well, you can't get that happening without TUBA. And then the flexible mindset, less of the tick box. One of the most interesting things is to listen to people who are more flexible already around of that versus people who are rigidly addicted to the tick box. And then their question, which frightens the heck out of them, is, what do I do if I don't tick the box with people?
Yeah, one of the things that came up when we did our session was one of the groups in working with had said they'd done away with it completely. There was no scoring, and the look of horror that went round the room where people had to take a step back and go, ooh, don't know if we feel very comfortable with that. But actually, when you sort of break it down and think about where they're trying to go with that, there's some real sense that sits behind it, because actually what they're looking to do is drive a different culture, and by focusing on where they can help people and giving people more responsibility for themselves, actually it doesn't fit a tick box culture.
So if you do that change, you increase the confidence and permission of advisors to want to learn, and you need to increase the coaching skills of the team leaders to make it a meaningful dialogue. And interesting, although a lot of the cultures get there, I can remember one of the water groups saying there's still people who have traditionally been given a score who cannot stand this coaching approach and just say, look, I don't want to know, just give me a score, condemn me as 93 or 62 and get it over and done with. Do I get my bonus? And trying to get them into, no, we're not talking now. We'd like to know, what did you discover about that call? What could we learn? How could we get better? Difficult to orientate people to a learning experience as opposed to just, you're right, you're wrong.
It's amazing to see how people do get hung up on that, and you can tell them all the amazing things they've done, but if they can't see that the score matches their perception of where they should be, you get this real disconnect, and they just don't take away those really great things they've been told. But
the important thing, we might as well just stay for a second on this slide, at this point, is if you can achieve it and get learning culture going on and engagement in that way, you lay a foundation for being an appropriate customer service culture for the future. That's the most important thing it's lining people up for, responding to these damn customers changing every 5 minutes. There's no way you're going to do that if people are passively accepting a score about their performance. Right. So actually that really just leads us to summarizing that before I hand over quickly to Simon. What has this enabled folk to do? Well, it's given people a 6-month space to think, plan and act. And I have to say, although the topic was P&Q, I would just say to contact centres generally, don't accept the tyranny of busyness. You might just have an end of quarter meeting. That's not good enough. Get people out in a structured program. It will not happen otherwise in terms of transformation. Support network has been vital. People seeing other approaches gives them the confidence to go back into their own organizations and make change, and peer-to-peer support, as we all know, is very, very, very powerful. The fact that it's not prescriptive and allows people to invent their own approach creates very high levels of ownership. And indeed, a lot of the programs that people have built have been built from suggestions coming back from advisors and team leaders, which has been powerful. And then the emphasis in terms of the trajectory is from score more towards looking at behaviors and changing those. From telling people what is right and wrong through to mutual learning on both sides. From micromanagement, which really is not the way to do it these days anyway, into mutual respect that both sides have got something to add there. From assuming I know, right, this is the way it's going to be, to actually listening. And part of that on quality is listening to the customer's experience, of course, and a huge emphasis on getting the customer feedback loop happening, of which analytics is one channel to get that feedback. And then from the fact that P&Q has not changed for 150 years to the fact, if you think about it, it's always going to keep evolving. And then how do you standardize the process of evolving it? And the framework provides you with a mechanism for a bunch of stakeholders to, in a constructive way, all get involved over a period of time. So what we're really trying to do as a test in terms of the challenge is to say, have you learned a new competency on how to manage an evolving P&Q? That's really what we said to companies at the end of the day. And Simon, let's give you a chance to talk now, because when did you actually finish the whole thing?
So we finished earlier this year, started it in December of last year.
Yeah.
So earlier on in the year, and for us it was, it's very much been that whole cultural change. So I think Martin's been talking about has really struck a chord, because when you look at where we come from and where we're aiming to go, there's a real kind of shift of responsibility and that kind of ownership, giving people more that they can do for themselves. What's really great with Echo as a business is that there's a recognition at higher levels that actually that cultural change fits with who we want to be as a company. So we're already doing internal things to try and help people develop skills and abilities and move on, but this fits really nicely into who we want to be as a company going forwards. So when we first started this, it was myself, Jamie Prosser, who's one of our quality assistants, and then Mark Tiston, who's from our client services department, went along to the original launch. And it was just a good chance for us to look at where we were, what we were doing, and how we could actually move forward. It was born from the fact that we'd done some self-analysis ourselves and taken us from where we were and thinking about, well, actually, where do you want to be? So initially, sorry,
That's all right.
So initially, from where we actually thought we were, as an organisation, we had a really good product. It was recognised. Our clients that we worked with got on board with it. They understood that it was fulfilling all their needs. We were finalists in the UK Customer Satisfaction Awards for our quality process, and we were always hitting our internal targets. So everywhere you looked at it, everybody was happy with what was being achieved. However, we would then start having conversations about, well, as this is something we haven't necessarily changed for a little bit, do we actually think that what we're doing is the best we can actually do? So this was a real opportunity to have a proper in-depth look at everything we did and say, do you know what else can we do? How else can we improve? What can we do that's going to give us more, give us a competitive edge in the market as well? So when we did that, there were some surprising facts that came out of it. So whilst we were producing these great scores, what we weren't necessarily doing was having a really holistic look at how we were scoring what we were doing. So it was a very kind of internally focused check on what I thought somebody was good at. Now that might be useful, but actually what we weren't necessarily considering is the impact on our actual customers externally. And we needed to think about how do we take on board what they're telling us, because actually that should be one of the most important factors. So we did do some IVR information, but as Martin said earlier on, it's a very limited kind of information. It doesn't give you a great big look as to what's actually going on. The other thing was that we had a culture where everything was about the process. So we were doing feedback sessions where people got involved and we'd ask their opinions, and so we already started to move towards giving more responsibility, but actually it still felt very much like a process where you have to monitor X number of calls and they have to get to this position here. And what everybody found was, rather than being passionate and think of it as something that we should be moving towards business, it almost became a little bit of a chore. And so what people were doing was, I need to get X number of monitorings in by a certain time. So the process was happening, but actually it wasn't necessarily giving people that passion for quality, which is really important in moving forward. So
can I just make a point there, because actually you've made a couple of really cracker points there. I think the difference between an internal perception of what quality is and the customer's perception is one of those big aha moments.
Yeah.
You see it frequently, don't you, when they do those external surveys comparing the two worlds. And assuming best intent on both sides, companies can literally think that they're doing a great job and yet miss it by a country mile. So one of the key things, and this is actually why you've got the honesty thing at the end of the day, is I think companies can very easily get settled into hearing what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And the whole point of feedback from customers is to find out what you don't yet know. Yeah. Now that's scary, that can ruin bonuses, that can do a whole bunch of stuff, but it's the only way you're going to survive today's world, which is changing so fast.
Because I think even it's down to, we listen to calls from the agent side, we don't actually listen to the customers navigating through the IVR system, for example.
No.
Yeah, and I think it's that whole experience, isn't it? Because you're literally driven by, I could think that someone's had a really great experience and their communication skills were really good, but actually if that customer goes away and they're not necessarily as pleased, well, there's an issue, because actually what that customer's telling me is the most important thing. Because we're an outsourcer, we also have to consider the implications of the clients we work with and how we manage ourselves as an organisation. So there is a bit of a balance there as well. And so what we had to do was find how we could make sure we really listened to and made sure the customers had an amazing experience. We ensured that we met those really high expectations of our clients we work with, but we're still very effective as an organisation. And so part of that was going out and doing an internal survey to every department that was affected by quality and asking them, what works for you, what do you need, what's really important, and almost having the kind of sit back and take what comes in and realise this is the things we should be considering if we want to get people on side. And a big part of that was we needed to measure what our customers are telling us, because that's a fair measure, because it's their experience, but also the big driver of us was around engaging the people that were doing the actual work. And so we came up with this concept that we wanted to build what we called individual personal responsibility. So the idea is that we put our teams at the heart of how they learn, how they get feedback, and how they develop. So rather than bringing them into a session, we ask them, how do you want your feedback? Do you want to sit down and discussion? Do you want the information emailed to you? But then we say, well, how do you want to learn and develop? So actually, we're going to be much more about facilitating that learning. And that ties into adult learning rather than treating people like children. And because with some of the other companies we worked with, they could give their teams a bit more freedom because it was their own company, and so they could empower them a bit more. It's slightly more challenging when you're an outsourcer. So we had to find a way, how do we empower our teams? And this ability to decide how you want to learn was our way of giving them that kind of power and responsibility back. So the idea was, this is where you are, and they are then going to be able to access things like webinars like this, or go book themselves onto training, or turn around and listen to other people's calls. It's more about, rather than saying, right, you need to develop this skill, you need to go into a classroom, it's actually saying what works for you. And the moment you hand that over and say, we're going to facilitate rather than we're going to dictate,
Yes.
what you're actually doing is turn around saying, and you know, when we get to the end of the month and we discuss where you are, that's you. You've got a responsibility of that, and just saying it's not up for us to.
And you know, that's a terrific journey to have taken, but equally, we should say as an industry, it's awful. This is frontline stuff. You know, and what's interesting is when some of the advisors come to the PQ award ceremony, they're a bit indignant that they've been treated so badly for so long in a sort of Victorian way, you know. But actually, at last, we're getting into proper mature learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
I tell you, but there's a great thing. I forgot to put it in as a picture, but just share with everyone the playing card ideas.
Yeah.
This is a genius idea. This is moving away from people who are told a score, sit passively and go, yeah, sure, to actually getting people to say, do you know what, I didn't do well on that call, I'm going to volunteer that insight, because that's counterintuitive to survival, isn't it? So
yeah,
how have you dealt with that?
It's been really interesting. So one of the things that we learned from our time was that we really needed to think about how do we give people that kind of safe environment to discuss where they need additional help. So each of the team members from the trial that we're going to be doing, give them a card, and if they feel that they haven't done the right thing on that particular call, what they can do is flag that up, speak to one of my quality team and say, look, I don't know if I've quite got this right, or I'm frightened I've said the wrong thing, can you give me guidance and help and assist me? And there's no judgment on...
That was the Joker, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So you can play your Joker once a month.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just that way of learning from, not mistakes, but learning from where you don't think you've given your best, without feeling you're going to be judged all the time.
That's how you can get that learning culture going.
And the other side of that was also making sure people celebrating when they've done really good calls as well. So in terms of where we are now, it's still early stages of implementation for us. We are looking at how we measure that customer information, how we gain that insight, because that's going to be a big part. But Jamie's already been working with one of our clients who's really keen and enthused to buy into this, which has always been a great thing as well. So there's lots of people on board at lots of different levels. It's giving them their feedback in the way they want it, and then working out how they actually want to learn and go forward. And so what that brings on to is we're going to do a 3-month trial just to test and make sure it does what we want it to do, and then look at, does it need any changes, any kind of development. Part of it is building a really big kind of learning depository. So rather than me have to hand out fact sheets and calls to people, they can do it all themselves, literally be able to log on and access as much information as they need to develop. And then it's rolling out to the rest of our content. But lots of buy-in, lots of people at the higher levels interested, because this kind of cultural change, I said, really does fit in with who Echo wants to be going forward.
Fantastic. Simon, that's brilliant. Very good indeed.
Thank you for that. Well, we're going to jump to some questions, tips, and opinions from the audience. So just a reminder that there is a bottle of champagne or box of chocolates for the best tip. If you could use hashtag question for a question, hashtag tip for a tip, and the discussion is carrying on in the discussion room, which is callcentrhelper.com/chat. So the first comment we've had from Holly about whether it should be 93 or 94%. It's 94% in their organisation, so I've asked many times why.
There's a good clue. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Tracy says, stay focused. Make sure it doesn't become a tick box exercise in attending the meetings.
Yeah.
Look to change bite-sized chunks where you can, and keep the communication channels open, especially in regards to success stories.
Yes,
So
yes,
that's
yes.
really key thing. Del says, we carry out a survey of our staff members to ask them what expectations are in regards to receiving and providing excellent customer service. So going back,
That's great.
That's really good, yeah.
the results of this survey are currently being used to build an effectively quality monitoring process that helps get their overall engagement into the process, right down to the questions.
I think that's really great. I think what they also might want to consider is the potential impact on the customer as well, if they're not already measuring that, because it's great to get that buying internally, but it's understanding how externally, what kind of impact that might have as well.
So we've got a question from Holly. Do you find that taking that role away from the team lead has caused issues from your team lead staff? Do they feel their role is being infringed upon?
I think, to be honest, because some of the feedback was it was seen as a chore rather than something where they could believe in a difference and pushing things forward, actually what we've got is lots of buy-in, because they're able to do more of the stuff that makes a difference. So rather than sitting there and thinking, I've got to get 16 monitorings done and I need to feedback in this way, what they're actually doing is much more facilitators. So they feel they're actually better leaders because they're not adult to child, they're more two adults having that conversation about how they can best move forward.
Yeah. Jonathan, here's one that you might have a view on. Tracy has said, I find the best approach was to start again. Look at what our customers are saying. What was working, what wasn't. Why were we having dissatisfied? Collect this as valuable customer insight. Because I think that's one of the key things that could be quite valuable, is bringing the customer's opinion into this.
Yeah, and I think the best way of looking at that is traditionally the old tick box approach is definitely an inside-out approach. It's what do I need to do, what is my process, and that drives the tick sheets. And this is going the other way, saying we're providing a service, what do our customers want to do, what's their view of it. And I think when Martin was talking about some of the definitions of quality, who influences quality, I think that the external view is a paramount importance. That's the one you need to look at, and looking at whether it's, you want to call it dissatisfaction or satisfaction or customer effort, these are all good ways of understanding what you need to improve on.
Yes, indeed, and we've got an audience tip that ties very much into that.
Beautiful, yes.
Customers should define quality. Sometimes it's the industry standard. I don't think we very often in our industry have customers defining the quality level.
No, but we should be. It makes absolutely good sense. And by the way, very encouraging. Loads more people are starting to collect various sources of feedback now, so I think it's going to become more common.
So let's just take a couple more before we pass across to Jonathan. Julie has said we do not have scoring anymore. We've gone to more of a coaching tool, which is great. And Tracy said our QAs for outbound agents are now based around the improvement of specific objectives. So less hung up on the scoring and more on the improvement versus revenue.
I will say, by the way, for those of us under a regulatory regime, where there needs to be some evidence of conformance, the scoring still happens, but it's used just as evidence for the fact that the process has been followed for compliance, as opposed to the fact it's a major input for advisors. And that just does need to be put as a caveat. So if you lose the emphasis on scoring, you might still have other reasons for maintaining it, but it's used for a different reason.
Yeah, and I think from our point of view, certainly when we have lots of clients, they still have certain things which have to be done or have to be said. So we still have to feed that back, but our emphasis is much more going to be about the customer.
I'll tell you one really good piece of news, by the way, for everybody is everybody's discovered the same thing, which is remarkable, actually, that you liberate the energy of the advisor community, refocus team leaders on proper coaching, as opposed to mentoring, by the way. I noticed somebody making that distinction earlier on, which is a well-made point. Get that going. One of the great things about this approach is the results are instant. So there's no, oh, where's my ROI on this thing? As soon as you get that, you get better results. And we're in the process of writing a number of white papers, which is basically showing absolutely those numbers keep getting better and better. And yet, the average handle time isn't necessarily getting longer, and yet more time is being spent coaching. So in other words, the whole culture is now moving towards smarter as opposed to harder. And if you think about what our industry has done for the last 20 years, that's major change of behavior, you know, and a very welcome one.
So we're now going to jump across to Jonathan Wax from Nexidia, and Jonathan's going to share with us some ideas of how we can automate a large part of the performance and quality management process through the use of analytics technology. So Jonathan, do you want to take us through your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that, Jonty. So just starting really picking up on a couple of points that have been said earlier. One of the key things of the is moving to this idea of looking at behaviours and measuring behaviours. And the trouble with behaviours is that if you pick a call that doesn't have that behaviour on it, you can't then do analysis against that. So we're seeing people understand the fact that they've got all the calls recorded, and therefore if they're able to start analysing those calls, then they can produce some very specific coaching ideas back down to those individual behaviours. And so what we're seeing now, as I say, is people taking their calls, putting them through an analytics engine, and then starting to be able to categorise those calls down to the individual level, so that the team leaders, the supervisors can do their coaching. But also what we're seeing, and on the screen here you can see this idea of, in the middle, the bottom here, the sentiment distribution. In this case we've got a set of calls that have come in, but we can also start looking at how they are impacting customer sentiment. And so we go from a negative scale to a positive scale, so it's -10 to +20. And so here you can, this is looking at the handle time of calls. So in the middle you've got a lot of transactional calls that are relatively neutral, but then you've got a tail both ways of positive and negative calls. And I think one of the examples also people talk about was looking for good examples of calls to use to recognise the success. And I think it's always been challenging to find good calls. But again, this means that the technology can support you in that ability to find good calls to reward success, but then also to find specific calls linked to specific behaviours. And here we're also classifying the calls by the topics that are covered. So this is sort of a process-based thing. But by the same token, you can have a behavioural view of the calls. So I think that's how we're seeing people starting to use it. If you look at sort of, I suppose, the ecosystem that Martin was talking about, people have got interactions traditionally from the voice channel, but also into the other channels. So there's lots of people handling with web chats. Is I think that's probably the largest other area, but also people looking at social media as a growing channel. And we're seeing that all of those are being pulled into the system, so that you can use it to understand the sentiment we've talked about, to talk about the topics that we've talked about, but even to understand how the conversations are going. And we see this really being driven into for people to be able to have a performance management system based on behaviours, based on all calls. So if you just start off saying, how would this work out in practical views? So the high-level view would be, say, what we can see happening in a contact centre. What we're now saying is actually at the supervisor level, I can go in and look at my team and understand the key metrics. I can look at the calls I've got. I can look at maybe individual agents, and then I can start to go into calls based on specific attributes. So again, I can create a a coaching plan that is unique to each of my team members. So if I've got 15 people in my team, I don't have to be doing the same coaching for each of them on a monthly basis. This is what I need to do based on the previous coaching session I've had, based on how I want to improve your individual performance. So again, this view of the world is allow customers to do that, and we've got, I know one organisation has really changed the way they coach, in as much as having gone from probably a traditional monthly approach to they now do weekly sessions, and they do a lot of the coaching at the back end of the week and saying, this is what you did on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or this is what you did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the coaching is saying, right, this is the things that you picked up on that we need to, that you've improved, and then these are the other areas that you need to look at. And again, it's not necessarily saying here's a score, but this is what you were doing. You can also take that down to the agent level as well. So an individual agent can have their portal, a view of their calls, so they can see all of the calls, how the evaluations have happened, and how and in this case, you're seeing the topics they have, so they can then go into these calls themselves and understand, are they doing what was meant of them or what wasn't meant of them. Then also tied into that, rather than having to listen to all the calls manually, if there are areas of a traditional evaluation that you say, I know that these things should be there, those calls can be sort of pre-marked, so they can say, yeah, in the areas of some of the very nitty-gritty, go back to Martin's idea, some of the compliance things, if there's some ID and V stuff that has to be in there, that can automatically be marked for the agent. So the agent can then focus on the skills, the areas that they're looking to improve on. And then this whole self-evaluation piece then enables them to, I suppose you could automate the joker type element, the playing card element Simon was talking about. They could listen to a call and go, actually, that was one that I didn't do what I did. Oh, but I didn't do what I need to do. I wasn't quite sure how to handle that call. So again, they can see that there, and then those calls can also be passed back to the team leaders. So the team leaders can come and assist the agents. So we see very much the fact that rather than having a process where you've gone off and chosen one or two calls that may or may not be representative, because we can process all the calls, we can present the data to the different people in a different way so they can do their jobs effectively. And I think we were talking about the idea of always listening. Martin's saying, what's the P&Q framework, this idea of always listening. This enables the team leaders to be far more actively, I suppose, listening, because a number of the calls are pre-listened to, or all the calls are pre-listened to for them. So there's a selection process for them. But also through the agent self-evaluation, the agent portal, the agents can then actually actively say, no, these are the ones I think you should be listening to. All of which links into this desire, this ability to have a system, an ecosystem that supports cultural change. So that's I think how we see analytics automating some of the elements that Martin and Simon talked about, and I think it runs at those three levels. It runs at the contact center level, it's enabling at the team leader level, the performance coach level, and it's enabling back down at the individual agent level. So those are the key areas I wanted to cover off, Jonty, so back to you.
Thank you very much for that. Certainly, I love the agent self-evaluation. We often say that you're your own worst critic, and I think that's particularly good. And particularly if you can provide a technology framework for that to happen, can work quite nicely. So let's jump in a few. Thank you for that, Jonathan. A few top tips and questions that we've had from the audience. So Matt says, aligning our quality program to reflect what we ask for customers in satisfaction surveys has worked really well for us, and trained the same. Have you done a lot of alignment?
Yeah, we've had to, for us, because we have a number of different clients with different responsibilities and different needs, that's certainly been a challenge, because what we want is consistency, but at the same time making sure we give all of our clients what they're actually expecting. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's something that we're working heavily on, and there is development in trying to get those two aligned across the whole contact centre.
So here's a couple of interesting ones. Provide wow cards where agents can provide details of calls they've provided. An amazing service. If the team leader listens and agrees, they receive a wow certificate. So looks like cards could be quite useful.
Yeah, good way of validating best practice.
Yeah, indeed. And top call of the month. I quite like this one. Of all the calls monitored for the month, calls that were scored 100% for technical and a 5 for quality put into a pool for the managers to listen to and decide what will receive that honour. The winner is then published in the company newsletter, and the reps enjoy the letter.
Well, yeah, I think there's the kudos bit, the recognition bit. The other bit, of course, is that you're trying to capture best practice and then presumably pass that on to other people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still a big fan of the idea you've got best performers, worst performers. The whole gain in a contact centre environment is to reduce the gap between best and least good.
Great one. Here's one that Jonathan, I think is up your street. Using a program that lets the agent hear their calls on their own. We use a bit of tech that makes the call available to the agent along with notes and bookmarks. They get to hear themselves without the embarrassment factor of having to play it out for management. I think Jonathan's quite nice.
Is he still there?
Yeah, and I know that one of our customers. No, I should be there. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
We can indeed.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay,
yes.
Good. Yeah, no, so I know that we had a customer that did exactly this. They set up a couple of PCs in a room to enable the agents to go in and sort of find their calls, select their calls, and listen to them with exactly this the same aim of there's no one looking over their shoulder. They were able to evaluate themselves and improve that way.
So Wendy says label coaching correctly internally. What I find is more often a mentoring approach is used rather than talking the development approach. It's more of a telling approach to feedback. So I think mentoring is a really key part of all this.
Yeah, definitely. I think far too often what people understand as coaching, what it actually means, isn't necessarily what coaching actually is.
Well, I think people wean themselves off from knowing best and telling people through to trying to have an attempt to coach, through to really pure play, which is literally getting the user to do all the work in terms of discovering the lessons. And that requires quite a high level of coaching. And in the transformation from typical team leader to that, you may well lose some folk en route. There were some other, just to pick up a few extra points here, John T. Yeah. People getting to some quite detailed discussions, been some very good discussion actually going on, about the connection of quality monitoring into the performance system, the connection into the values system of the business to give it, a deeper anchoring, and all of those being great explorations of ecosystem thinking. In other words, how does it connect into the whole, and to get that greater benefit from it? And I must say, there are some very, very smart ideas which have been coming through in the latter part of the discussion, and clearly there are some best practice environments out there. So it would be great if we can take some of the stuff that we've been typed out here and, as you normally do, put those out in some of those posts, because there's been some great examples from the audience here this afternoon.
Absolutely wonderful ones here. We're going to take two more before we move on to the next part. Team leaders appreciate the extra support to develop the team, which enables them to focus more on the team synergy side of things, which I think is which is great. And interesting one here: present to groups of customers. We presented our process for quality monitoring, why we take it seriously, and run through some simple exercise to understand what they wanted from a call, what made it feel special to them, and how they wanted us to treat them at the telephone. Yeah. It's enlightening. It's helped us to understand our customers more and tailor our service appropriately.
One general point here, by the way, is we talk about it in the program, we all probably want and need to have high-performing teams. That's coming through all over in organisations, but particularly in customer service where we're meant to be bloody marvellous, and it's very difficult to be that. Can we think of an example in life where you don't have a coach if you're a high performer? Think of sport, think of music, think of anything. You have a coach. So actually it makes tremendously good sense to actually build constant high-quality feedback to those people so they can learn, so they can improve. And that's going to be the nature of what a contact centre environment's going to look like if you want to have terrifically effective people changing and influencing NPS scores and all those other things that you say are top of your customer experience agenda.
Indeed. Well, so we're just reaching the top of the hour now. So in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? If you could put that into the chat room. If you'd like to register for next year's P&Q challenge, if you'd like to get in touch with Zeva, Zeva's quietly in the corner of the room with us here, and it's at zmian@nexidia.com would be great, or you could join the LinkedIn group. If you want a copy of the slides, that's also available on CallCentreHelper, and you can watch the webinar on the same link as we're dialing in today. We're going to be doing a live chat tomorrow, same time at 1 o'clock, just in the chat room again, callcenterhelper.com/chat, where we're going to be looking at making metrics work. So I'd just like to say thank you to all 3 of our panelists today. To Martin Hill-Wilson, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
To Simon Thatcher, thank you for joining us. And also Jonathan Wax, thank you for joining us remotely. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And well done, audience, by the way.
And,
fantastic.
Finally, a thank you to all of the audience, as ever, for joining us. And if you could complete the survey as you leave the webinar. Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye-bye.